Hi. So, as you know, one of the writing topics that you might be interested in learning more about is China's one child policy. I'm going to give you some background information to be able to understand why China enacted this new law and what were some of the results that came out of it. So, China is a huge country, the kind of huge that is hard to wrap your head around. Beginning in the 1950s, its population took off from 500 million to almost three times that to 1.4 billion that it is today. This makes it bigger than North America, Australia, and Europe combined. So think about that for a minute. All of the populations of North America where we live, all of the population of Australia and Europe together does not equal the population of China. China wanted to become one of the world's strongest rivals for business, and yet its own people were having problems with overcrowding and housing shortages and starvation. With the average Chinese family having 6 kids per family, the government knew that in order to have the economy grow, it needed to deal with the overpopulation issue. So I want you to imagine for a second that you are the Chinese government and you have to figure out a way to be able to limit the population in order to save the people that are currently living there. What would you do? The Chinese government decided to create a rule that families were only allowed to have one child. There were a few exceptions. So if you lived in a rural farming area, you were allowed to have more than one child. If both parents were only children, you could have more than one. Or if you were a different race than the mostly Han population of China, you could also have more than one child. Also, if you happen to have twins or multiples, you were allowed to keep both the children or the children that you had. Or if your child died and you were able to have another one because you weren't too old, then you could have an additional child. It's important to remember that the Chinese government is communist. We live in a democracy, and often the American attitude is you don't get to tell me what to do. Just look at how difficult it was to try and kick the spring breakers in Florida off of the beaches during the latest coronavirus event. China is very different. The government would impose massive fines for people caught breaking the law of having more than one child. Some of those fines were an entire year's wages, which would be astronomical for people to have to pay. There are even some reports of forced abortions if a woman was caught having been pregnant and already had a child. The Chinese government states that the law that they began in 1980 was successful. They state that 400 million births were prevented, although there are some people that dispute that there were that many. This allowed their economy to grow and the poverty level to decrease. So those are some of the positives that came out of this law and what they had originally intended the law for. Some say it was successful. In 2015, the Chinese government changed its law and now allows Chinese families to have 2 children per family. So let's look at some of the side effects of having this law. There are some that claim that because they only have one child, they are able to give all of their time and resources to making sure that that child does really well in school. There is less poverty and starvation, so they're able to take care of the needs of that child and give them everything that they want to be able to grow and develop. On the flip side, there are fewer children, and that is a concern because there are some that feel there is not enough children to help support the very large and increasing elderly population. There also are not enough young people to work in the economy, in the jobs, to be able to support China. Another interesting fact is that for every 100 girls, there are 117 boys. This deals with the Chinese traditions where boys are valued more than girls because they take care of their elderly parents, whereas the girls will take care of their husband's parents. Therefore, when some families are finding out that they are pregnant with a girl, they are giving this girl away or they are aborting it. In the end, this means that there are less women for men to be able to marry when they get older, and that is a concern in China at this time. So I hope that helped clarify you some of the information regarding China's one child policy, and that you were able to get some pros and cons as to how that law has impacted the Chinese people.